Kia ora everybody, welcome back into my channel. So today we are going to be talking about Auckland versus Wellington. Now this is going to be less of like a head-to-head comparison and more just me kind of recounting my own experiences of living in both of these cities. Just for a bit of context, if this is your first time watching me and you don't know anything about me, I grew up in Auckland and I basically lived here all my life, but last summer, I guess we're still in summer, I interned in Wellington, so I lived there for about 2.5 months. And in Auckland I've always kind of lived in the suburbs, but when I was living in Wellington I was living like pretty much very central, like across from the train station, so that definitely did kind of impact my experience as well. Starting off with some objective differences, Auckland is massive, it's a lot bigger. There's about 1.5 million people, whereas Wellington is very small, very compact, and I want to say there's about 500,000 in kind of like the metro area. And Auckland is kind of further up north, and then Wellington is at the bottom of the North Island, and it's also the capital of New Zealand. My favourite things about Wellington, I loved how much nature there was, like even just in the city. There was just trees and like forest all around you. Literally the botanical gardens were like maybe like a 10-15 minute walk from the city, and yeah, it just felt like you were in a very like remote forest, which is really cool. I think Wellington generally tends to have a little bit of a younger vibe. There's a ton of students, obviously, you know, there's Vic Uni, and being very small, like everything's very compact and it's very walkable, and also the public transport is pretty good as well. Buses would get like a lot more full than in Auckland, at least in my experience. It's just a nice public transport system. My only kind of complaint is that the Snapper card, which is kind of like the hop card, if you guys are from Auckland, it doesn't work on trains or ferries. So if you want to take a train, you can't just use the same like bus card, you have to buy another ticket, which is annoying. But yeah, other things about Wellington, they have really good like cafes and kind of restaurants. It's very like hip and trendy. As someone that's plant-based, pretty much every cafe or restaurant had, you know, a vegan option, and they would have all their like vegan, dairy-free, like gluten-free stuff labeled. Whereas in Auckland, maybe it's because I don't go to the city that often, but even when I was like in St. Heliers the other day, the cafe didn't even have like a decent vegan option. Definitely if you're kind of looking for like vegetarian food, I reckon Wellington wins on that one. Another thing is beaches. So Wellington actually has some pretty nice beaches, especially for how close it is to the city. There's Oriental Bay, which is kind of the main city beach, and fun fact, it's actually a man-made beach, so it wasn't there before, but yeah, it's very nice. It gets pretty packed during summer as well. And then the waterfront in Wellington is real nice, especially on a good day. You'll see a ton of like people, families, people just walking with their dogs, and yeah, it's just a nice place to chill. Wellington is also definitely quite artsy. It's like a lot more oldie, like the fashion sense. There's a lot of like art students, design students, so I think that definitely does impact the city, and there's lots of like festivals and, you know, museums and all that kind of stuff, which is good. I'd say the worst parts of Wellington are that the weather is definitely a lot worse. It gets very, very windy. I mean, people told me Wellington was windy, but I didn't realize how windy it actually was. Like it's super, super windy, even during summer. Like some days I would be wearing like a scarf and a coat because it was just that bad. So the rent, a rent in Auckland is pretty bad as well, but I think in general Wellington is actually worse. Prices are higher because the supply is less, and there's also a huge demand because of, you know, students and everyone kind of moving for work and all that stuff. And also the houses are, a lot of them are like very old and run down and like damp and moldy, which is not ideal. Another thing I noticed when I was in Wellington is there seemed to be more homeless people, especially around kind of like the Courtney Place area, which was really kind of sad. I mean, Auckland also, you know, if you're in the city you will see like homeless people as well, but I don't think there was quite as many as in Wellington. Wellington also did feel a bit more sketchy to me, especially at night. I did get mugged, so I have made a video on that. I'll link it down below if you guys want to hear more. I don't know, it's a bit dodgy. Like I'm on a Facebook page called Vic Deals, and you know, every day you hear of like someone's car getting smashed, someone's house getting broken into. Like, of course that does happen in Auckland as well, and I don't think it happens like in the suburbs as much. Another observation is that even though Wellington has a lot less people, because the city is so like small and compact. It actually feels quite crowded, especially during the weekdays when, you know, everyone's coming in to work and stuff. It does get pretty crowded. However, one thing that I don't like about Wellington is that the fact that everything closed super early. On Lambton Quay, which is kind of like the main street, I guess the equivalent would be Queen Street in Auckland, the banks weren't even open during the weekend, and that was really annoying, especially when I needed to like get a new Air Force card and I couldn't because they were only open from like 8 till 4, 8 till 5 or something like that, which coming from Auckland is just like, what? Like even the banks here in the suburbs, they're like open on Saturdays and Sundays and, you know, till like 6 or 7 and stuff. Yeah, that was a bit annoying. Like during the weekends and stuff, all the shops would kind of just be dead. Moving on to Auckland, I have done a pros and cons video of Auckland, so I'll link that down below. I guess in comparison to Wellington, Auckland's a lot bigger, it's a lot more spread out, there will be a lot more traffic, and it's going to take you longer to commute to places. So for example, the longest commute I heard in Wellington was maybe like 30 minutes, whereas in Auckland it's very common to have to commute like an hour and a half just to get into the city. And in terms of weather, like I never thought of Auckland as having nice weather, but after living in Wellington it definitely is a lot better. Like the temperatures I would say on average are about 5 degrees Celsius, like higher, and there's definitely more sun and a lot less wind, which is good as well, because one time I was at the beach, it was super windy, like all the sand got into your food and it was just not a fun time. And I think I touched on beaches before, but although Wellington does have quite a few beaches, especially near the city, there's not really any, I would say, amazing beaches, especially if you're into surfing. I mean, Wellington does have Lyell Bay, which I guess is like their surf beach, but the one day I was there was hardly any waves, so I don't know how people would surf there. And compared to like Piha and Muriwai, like there's really no competition. In Wellington is that a lot of people I met, they weren't from Wellington, like they were from other parts of New Zealand or even other places in the world. So there was quite a few people from like New Plymouth, Palmerston North, and other kind of smaller cities in the North Island and even the South Island, and also quite a lot of Aucklanders as well. So if you're moving down to Wellington from Auckland, like don't worry, you'll definitely know someone, and you'll definitely meet people when you're there. Another thing I noticed in Wellington was people definitely seem to be very like health and fitness conscious. Like even when I was working, like people would, you know, leave in the afternoon just to go to the gym or go for a run during their lunch break. Like if you're out in the city on a weekday, you'll see people literally just like running around just doing exercise on their lunch break, which I don't really ever see in Auckland. Going back to the weather, like although the weather kind of sucks in Wellington, when it's sunny it's really really nice and everybody talks about it and everyone says you can't beat a good day in Welly, which is very true. So everyone makes the most of good days, and definitely weather is like big conversation topic like in the office. Wellington definitely does have a lot of opportunities, especially in the public sector. If you're working with like government agencies and you want to work in, I don't know, maybe study like economics or law, and you want to work for like the Treasury or Ministry of Business, Ministry of Justice, you know, all of that kind of stuff is going to be predominantly based in Wellington. So I know a lot of people move down for jobs, so that's definitely one. Also for students, if you're moving down, if you're moving to another city for uni, I would definitely choose Wellington over Auckland. Like there's just a better student vibe there, whereas in Auckland everyone's kind of just like living at home and, you know, just goes to uni and goes home. Whereas in Wellington, you know, everything's more compact and life's kind of based more around campus, and I feel like it's just, I don't know, a cooler city for students at least. One really important thing that I still haven't mentioned is the diversity. I have a chart of the demographics, which I will insert here, but Auckland is definitely a lot more diverse. I think it's almost like 30% Asian and like 20% Pacific Islander, whereas Wellington is definitely a lot less diverse. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are still, you know, people from other cultures and stuff like that, but in general, like it is pretty white, especially where I was working. I was often the only Asian person in the room, which is not that fun, to be honest. Like I wouldn't say people are racist by any means, but it's just like sometimes people like look at you or like maybe just kind of like double take. They don't see like people of color as often, I guess. And I guess coming along with that, there was also like the different cuisines of food, and Wellington actually does have, you know, a few nice restaurants, like especially Vietnamese. I noticed there was quite a few, but in general, in terms of like Asian food, especially Chinese food, Auckland definitely wins on that one. So I guess just to wrap up, I think Wellington is good if you're a student. Wellington is good if you are working in the public sector and you want, you know, a job in government, then it's kind of the obvious choice. But I think Auckland, if you're really looking for a bit more of like the city hustle life and you know, if you like Asian food, if you like that kind of culture, if you're working in the more kind of like commerce or, you know, finance kind of space, Auckland's probably a better option. All in all, both cities are awesome. I recommend you visit both, you know, go to both if you can, and, you know, even live in both if possible. But yeah, that's it. Again, most of this was my opinion, so don't take it too seriously, but hopefully this was interesting and informative, and I'll see you guys in my next video.